All right. Well, we have a pretty packed 30 minutes for you guys today. So I think we will go ahead and get started. And then anybody who jumps on, we can get them up to speed in the chat. So welcome to the April CQ Growth Lab. We're talking about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I know I've talked with many of you about this topic in different ways over the years, but today is going to be really focused on culture and the culture that we want to build within our practices. So helping me facilitate the conversation today will be Dom Spadaro. I'll ask him to say hi here and just introduce himself as well.
Howdy, y'all. Dom Spadaro, I'm VP of Specialty Sales at CQ. Been working with y'all for 17 years and loving every minute of it. Looking forward to today.
Awesome. Thank you, Dom. And I should have introduced myself as well, so I'll do that now. I'm Caroline Lewis. I lead our People and Culture group for CQ Partners. I have had the pleasure of working with all of you for just about 3 years now, and have learned so much about the industry and what culture challenges and opportunities we specifically have in hearing healthcare. So lots of good learnings there to share with you today. So again, just to mention this as well, so we've got a packed 30 minutes, but we love to have interaction. So we just encourage you, if we're talking about something here that is interesting to you or you have thoughts you want to share, throw those into the chat. We would love to hear that. It also gives us an indication of what you're interested in, and that can help inform follow-up sessions that we could have on this topic as well. Okay, so all of that said, and so we're going to talk about 5 decisions that shape your culture and how those do just that, and what some factors are in those decisions. But before we dive into that, just wanted to spend a minute kind of baselining what we really mean when we use this word culture, because it's one that we throw around a lot. So I have a definition of this that I really like. It's kind of a more formal definition. So it defines culture as a common set of behaviors and underlying mindsets and beliefs that shape how people work and interact day to day. So common set of behaviors, mindsets, and beliefs that really shape how we interact and how we behave. And then a simpler way that I like to think about this is it's what we experience at work every day. In the good times, the bad times, and everything in between. It's what we feel like when we're at work. That's the culture. So for all of you, I think we have mostly leaders here on the phone today, if not all leaders. You already have a culture on your team. So the question is not whether or not you have one, but it's whether or not it's the culture that you would choose, the culture that you're intentionally trying to build. And, I think an interesting exercise to consider after this is to really sit down with a pen and paper and think about and maybe write down, what do I think our culture is today at our practice? How would you define that? And what are the things that tell you what that is? And an exercise I've done in the past with a previous team that I worked on is I pulled in all the members of the team and we worked on that together. What do you guys think the culture is? How do you know? What do you experience? And I think you would find you learned some things from the team members too. So it's always great to do that kind of baseline exercise. So just something to think about there. So let's dive into the 5 things. So as you know, hiring and recruiting is also near and dear to my heart. So we got to start with that. So when we think about hiring, this is really about how we build a team. And for each of these 5 areas, I've selected for me something that I believe is a culture builder and a culture killer. So it's just one thing to consider in this process. So we'll talk through that. And then I'm going to ask Dom to chime in too as we go on each of these areas, because he mentioned he's got that 17 years of experience. And he's seen a lot about what works in practicality and what doesn't work. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. So with hiring, this is probably the most common set of builder and killers that I see. So a culture builder is to hire for how someone shows up holistically, their attitude, their traits, and their experience, right? And traditional hiring practices place a lot of weight on a candidate's experience, and it makes sense, right? We receive a resume, we look at that, we kind of get a sense of what a candidate has done so far. and we try to make a determination about what they're capable of, right? And it's logical and it makes sense. But one of the big pitfalls that we see in that process is that sometimes we tend to overweight that experience or technical skill, maybe a little bit more than we should. And I know when we interview, we're trying to uncover holistically, what is this candidate going to be like to work with? And that's a challenge. Um, so we're going to talk about that more here in a minute. But when we think about this decision and how it factors into your practice and how you want to manage this particular process, think about how you attract candidates, how you interview candidates, and how you choose, how you actually make the selection. So I want to ask Dom to chime in here because I know there are a couple examples from a practice that he works with regularly of some really positive culture building hiring practices that he's seen. So Dom, will you talk
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, there's one practice in particular, pretty good sized practice too, that it's interesting when you really take a step back and look at it that 80 to 90% of their employees have come from referrals, have come to the practice from referrals. And that could have been referrals from internal employees, people that are currently working there that they've reached out to them. They knew them they knew them from school or from an externship or from another place of work. Also, things like front office folks from different medical offices that were calling back and forth for referral, exchanging referral information, things like that for patients. They had such a great experience with the practice. They started asking questions like, wow, you guys have such a great culture there. You seem like you have such a great time. You seem like you enjoy each other. I always hear people laughing in the background. Man, if you guys ever have an opening there, please let me know. And then in some of those instances, it's been like, yeah, we definitely will. Or, actually, we actually do have an opening because we're expanding and we have an opening here in this location. Oh, really? Wow. Then they're making introductions over to the leadership team to start the interview process. So the attraction, comes from, I think, creating such a culture to where your employees want to bring great people into the team. And then from an interview standpoint, in this practice, it was really interesting too. There's not so much interviewing for skills. They count on CQ recruiting to vet for skills and make sure that that stuff is there. But when they come in for the interview, they're looking more for character and attitude. And one simple example is this front office person got to a place where she said, look, my prior employer, there's a merger happening, and I very well might have an opportunity to go back over there. And the interview question came, well, we really like you here. We'd love to have you join our team. If we extend this offer and in a couple of days you get an offer from this other organization, what are you going to do? That's a character question, right? And that person answered and said, well, once I give my word to something, I'm committed. And once I give you my word, I'm here. And guess what happened? That actually happened. She did get an offer from the other place. It was for more money. And you know what she did? She stuck to her word. So those kind of questions, you may feel like, ooh, I don't know, that's a tough, but that's the kind of interview questions this practice gets into when they're actually having that person come in and sitting down and talk with them. And that's how they're choosing. They're choosing based on character, not just experience and technical skill.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And Dom
Mhm.
really talked about a couple good things there, right? That factor into those things that we consider, which is how do you attract candidates? Wow, interesting. If you can build up that employee referral base, you're not just doing the post and pray, right? Which, we get a lot of good candidates through those methods, and we do a lot of other things too to bring folks out. But at the end of the day, your employees are going to be really good indications of whether or not someone's going to be a good fit based on those relationships that they've already built. And then to Dom's point, what questions can we ask? What does the interview process look like? So, one quick takeaway here for you to consider, if you want to move the needle here and really look at this for your practice and really try to hone in on how can I hire for overall fit, not just experience, Select what you want those top 3 non-negotiable attributes to be for your practice. There's no right answer here, right? But maybe it is, I want somebody who's good at building trust. I want somebody who's flexible because I know it's not if we change, it's when. And I want someone who is solution oriented, right? Choose your top 3. Those are 3 that are really big for me. And then try and reverse engineer your interview questions to help reveal whether or not someone has those things. And we are here to help with that. Myself, Taylor, Dawn, that's what we're here for. Anybody on the CQ team can help you get to the bottom of those, because it is an art form to um, come up with those really good interview questions, but it is worth it. And I think you'll find that if you consistently ask those questions of every candidate that you talk to, regardless of role, you'll start to see some patterns emerge there, and you'll hear what a great answer sounds like, what a good answer sounds like, and maybe that red flag answer too to watch out for. And Diana, I saw in the chat there. Yeah, so my 3 were flexibility, ability to build trust with others, and a solution-oriented mindset. Right? When problems come up, are they looking for someone to blame? Are they looking for a way out? Do they just avoid the issue, or are they really wanting to be part of that solution? And I do have some interview questions that I'd be happy to share with this attendee list that correspond directly to those things. So if you're interested, let me know and we'll be happy to send those out. All right. So number 2.
Yes, please.
Thanks. I will do that. Okay, so number 2, how we recognize and reward. And just for clarity here too, when I say recognize, I mean notice. When I say reward, I don't necessarily mean compensation. Something to reinforce that behavior. That's what I think about when I think about reward. So we'll talk about some examples there. But I think a culture builder for me that I've seen is specific, timely recognition tied to values. So specific meaning what exactly happened that you want to replicate or that you want to reward or recognize. Really being specific. Hey, not just you did a great job on that project, but the way that you handled the change in milestones when that came up, the way that you communicated to the team, even during times of uncertainty, really being specific about that. And then the timely recognition piece. I think this is really big. A lot of organizations might have an employee of the year. I know at CQ, we have an employee of the quarter. Those things are awesome. Don't do away with those. Those are great, right? And those are good ways to really recognize those big, maybe long-standing projects. But the fact is also there are lots of little good things that are done every single day. And we often miss out on the opportunity to recognize those. Even better if we can really tie those to our values. So remember in the last section there, we're talking about what are those values or what are those attributes. So if one that you have is building trust, and again, I think this is just critical in every job. If it's building trust, okay, how did what someone did tie back to that? When you followed up with that patient, even though it wasn't part of our typical process, because you knew that there was some question that they had that was still outstanding, you built trust through doing that. Or if you helped a colleague, with something that you saw them struggling with, you built trust, right? How do you tie that back to the values? I think that's a really good culture builder. A culture killer that I think we inadvertently sometimes do is just focused on recognizing production or revenue. And that's important too, right? We know that. And a lot of us have commission plans that are structured around directly recognizing those things. That's great. That's important. Compensation is important to everyone. And we just don't want to solely focus on those things because those aren't the only things that we care about, right? We care about all the little things that happen in between. We care about the how that someone gets there. So things to think about when you consider this. Think about what gets noticed, meaning what are those behaviors, right? Those micro behaviors. Who gets recognized? We want to make sure that we're recognizing across our team, not just certain roles. And then how often? We talked about that a little bit already, but what is a cadence that feels good to you? Is it every week? Is it every day? Is it once a month? There's no right answer there, but think about that. Think about what might feel good to you if you put yourself in the employee's shoes. So, Dom, I'm curious any feedback you have here, any experiences you have around recognition and rewards. Is there anything that comes to mind for you here?
Yeah, I've seen several practices do this with vigor and with great success, and they implemented like a weekly way of doing this. They use their daily huddle or weekly huddle to do this, and their core values as an organization, and they kind of had like themes with it. So what I saw that was kind of really cool is in one situation, like every day of the week had a different theme to it. So Monday was Magic Moment Monday, and that was an opportunity to recognize someone on the team the week earlier that had a magic moment that they then would share and highlight and recognize that person for doing. Teamwork Tuesday was another one. So this was an instance where someone really did something for a team member, and that teamwork came together. And on down the line, and I could share those in the chat, just different examples of how you could go about doing that. These are simple little things, but for a team member to get recognized like that, and you can kind of rotate through folks, and when they get recognized, the rest of the team takes note, like, oh, that's something they want to see more of. And oh, that felt really good to get recognized for that. I'm going to do that more. We do something similar to that at Demont. We have a way of a system that we can put something in and have someone get recognized that way. So got to find a way that works for you, but the key here is the consistency to it. And I really like the idea of having something where you're recognizing having an opportunity to recognize team members for doing some great stuff that's in alignment with your core values on a weekly basis. That's how you start to build momentum.
Totally agree. And I think weekly is an awesome cadence. Think about that. Think about how many things happen in a week. Spend a lot of hours with your team in a week. So I love that. Number 3, it's about how we uphold standards. So those of you who join our weekly Wednesday leadership calls have heard us talk a lot about standard as of late. And if you're interested in being on that call and you're not part of it, ping me in the chat. We'll get you an invite. But we've been talking a lot about standards and what those mean for us as leaders and as employees and why this matters. And so the culture builder here is clear, consistent expectations, right? That's how we communicate what the standards are and how those translate into actual behaviors, paired with accountability, right? Because it's one thing to say what our standards are, it's another thing to hold people accountable to those. The culture killer is unclear expectations and inconsistent follow through, right? People are not clear about what great looks like, and we don't hold folks accountable. So, when we think about what to consider here, think about clarity. Think about clarity around this, right? So if we say we want our front office team to be professional, what does that mean? Or we want our providers to ensure that they take care of every patient as if they were a family member. What does that mean to us? What does that mean in terms of behaviors? How can we get more granular and more clear with our employees about what that looks like? Think about fairness, right? How we treat one employee should be generally how we treat all employees, right? So if we have one employee who is not being held to the same standard of expectation as the others, people notice that. People notice
She's the
that.
favorite. She's the favorite.
Yeah, right? So that's a big one. And then we already talked about accountability, and I think there are lots of interesting ways to create a culture of shared accountability. So it's not just you as a leader holding people accountable all the time, but that's a big one. Dom, any examples come to mind for you here?
Yeah, from our premier group, we had a practice in that group that they were having issues with team members being on their cell phones during the day. It's becoming a real problem and a point of frustration for sure. You come out of a consult, your front office person's on the phone, on their cell phone, on social media, and you're like, "Argh." So they made a policy, no cell phones in the office during the day. You can use them on your break in the break room only, and that's it. Or go outside, during your break. And they made a policy. They explained it to everyone as to why, and it was relative to the patient experience. And here's the key piece to this whole thing is, as leaders in the practice, they did the same thing. They put their cell phones away as well, because that's a key piece. You can't have a policy for all the team members, but the owners and leaders of the practice decide, oh, that doesn't apply to me. That doesn't work. And here's what they found is like, wow, so much more got done. Everyone was so much more focused and, quite frankly, happier throughout the day. At first, it was like a shock, and then but once they got into it, it's like, I kind of like not having my cell phone and not being distracted by that. It helps me focus better. That was a good call.
Yeah, and that clarity piece is huge, right? That's just clarity. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think oftentimes one of the common things I'll see in employee handbooks for practices and in general organizations is, minimize personal cell phone use during work hours. What does that mean? Does that mean I can use my phone for 5 minutes every hour? Does that mean when there's not a patient at the front desk, I can pull my cell phone out? What does that mean? So just being really clear about, hey, you know what? In our practice, we don't use personal cell phones during the day except on break time. If there is an emergency, we have landlines here. You are welcome to give that phone number to anyone that you need to, and that's how they can reach you. Right? So there's some creative ways to really enforce that or hold folks accountable. But I think that in this case, clarity is kindness, and that's really important. Um, so your action challenge here is to define, and I know many of you have been working on this as part of the management program that we've done too, define those 2 to 3 non-negotiable standards and communicate them clearly to the team. Choose a couple really important ones and then hold folks accountable and yourself as well. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones because I think this is where the rubber really meets the road. We talked earlier about what is culture. I think oftentimes culture is what we experience during hard times. I think that's what people remember. Good times too, right? But the hard times really leave an impact on folks. So, how we handle problems. So, for me, a culture builder is when we handle problems with curiosity and we have that problem solving or solution oriented mindset, meaning I'm going to approach it as a leader as I'm not sure what happened here, but I want to find out. I want to figure out where in this process did something break down. If there was a mistake, if there was an issue with a patient, if there was an issue between employees, what happened? I'm not going to go into it thinking that I know the answers, even if I think I might, right? Because we never have all of the information. So, how can we approach these issues with curiosity and say, hey, what did we learn here? Or what's the opportunity? Or where did the process break down? And really focus on turning that into an opportunity to problem solve, to say, you know what, we've needed to look at this process for 10 years. Let's do it. We're going to do that together. Versus the culture killer, which is who made this mistake? Why did that happen? How did you do that? I've trained you on that before, right? That's one, that's blame. Two is avoidance completely, right? And we all do this from time to time. I'm just not going to deal with it. I noticed a mistake, but I'm not going to deal with it.
I just don't
And
have the
then,
energy for this right now.
right. I don't
Yeah.
have the time. I don't have the energy. It's not that big of a deal, right? Whatever the story is that we tell ourselves. And then potentially passive aggressive communication as well, right? You get frustrated and you make an offhand comment and people get the message. It's just maybe not the way you would have liked for them to receive it. So when we think about this, how we handle problems, think about the language that we use. Think about the reactions that we have when someone comes to you and tells you something has gone wrong. And then think about your follow through. What do you do with this information? How can we turn this into progress or turn it into a gain, turn it into a positive where someone maybe has made a mistake, but they don't feel like that's the end of the world because we're going to turn this into an opportunity for everybody. So I'm going to challenge everybody with an action here. Next time an issue comes up, take a step back. Think about how you can handle this with intentionality. Replace that who did this with what in the process allowed for this to happen. And how can we approach this differently next time? What's the learning here? For the sake of time, I'm going to move on to number 5. And this is the all-encompassing topic that we all talk about all the time, which is communication. So when we think about this, communication is kind of the delivery system for your culture. And if this is inconsistent, your culture will be too. And we've learned this many, many times. When we don't communicate, our team kind of fills in the gap for us, right? It's usually not the most generous interpretation of what's going on. So the culture builder here is open, proactive, clear communication. The culture killer that we want to avoid is information silos. We want to avoid last minute surprises for folks. And what we affectionately have deemed at CQ drive-by communication. So Dom, talk about that for a minute. Where have you seen drive-by communication take place?
I've seen that so many times, and it happens at CQ too. Let's be real here, right? Like it's a common thing in every organization. But the drive-by communications, what I mean by that are when you don't have a set aside time to actually meet with your team members one-on-one. What typically happens is what I like to call drive-bys. They'll, hey, knock on your door real quick. Hey, Matt, can I talk to you about this real quick? Hey, this keeps happening, and I just wanted to let you know about it. And okay, I gotta go answer the phone. And you're like, what? Like what? Okay, what do you want me to do with that? That's a drive-by, and then you're interrupted from what you were doing. And it could happen the other way. You're like on passing by the front desk, and you pull a drive-by on the front desk. Hey, Taylor, would you do me a favor from now on when this happens? Would you do this? And it's like, oh, okay, yeah. And then it's like, all right, I got to go back with the patient. Those are drive-bys. Those leave people making up stories in their head about where did this come from? What's the motivation behind it? What's happening? Guys, take the time to set up a time. Like, hey, listen, I really want to hear you out on this, and I'd love to dig into this a little bit more. Let's set up a time to talk. And even if it's in a day or two, or, oh, by the way, we have our one-on-one scheduled for tomorrow. Let's discuss this tomorrow. That way you can actually dive into it, respect that person both ways, and hopefully come to some solutions together with it. The key here is some way of having deliberate, planned out communication with each member of your team. If you're thinking, well, there's no way I can do a weekly one-on-one. Okay, well, can you do it once a month? Can you do a weekly team meeting even? Look, anything is better than nothing. The key here is just like we talked about at Reconnect. It's about progress, not perfection. Yeah, perfect world, weekly one-on-one with everyone with your team for at least a half hour. Can you do that? If you can't, okay, then maybe it's a team meeting once a week. But you got to have a mechanism to be able to have deliberate communication. Otherwise, you're just going to get drive-bys all the time and everyone's frustrated.
Well said, Dom. Well said. So in conclusion, here's our challenge to everybody on the phone today. For 2026, decide what you want to really focus on to move the needle with your culture. Choose one of these 5 areas and commit to really making progress this year. Or if you're like me, you can be an overachiever and choose a few. But really think about how you can move the needle in some small, intentional ways. It will pay dividends and your team will notice. And again, a great place to start is just to sit down with your team or individually and think about this as a leader. What is the culture today? Is it what I want it to be? Is it what the team wants it to be? What's my role in that? What is the role of others on the team as well? And Dom mentioned this to me yesterday when we were talking. It is everybody's job to build a culture. So how do you get people on board? So I'll leave you with that challenge. And if you want to talk more about this, if there's a culture change that you want to make, talk with your account manager. They can pull us in. We are happy to help. That's what we're here for. It takes a village, but it absolutely is possible to improve and adjust your culture and to really work on these things. So we're here to help you do that. Thanks for your time today, everybody. Really enjoyed seeing you, and we'll talk with you soon.
Take care, everybody.